All right, folks, so this is going to be part one of the Chapter 7 guided program development video, where we're going to be developing a scuba diving application. Um, so let's get started. I'm going to start with going out to my flash drive, a Visual Basic folder. I'm going to create a new folder. Why can't I create a new folder? There we go. My computer was just running a little slow. Delete those two folders, three folders. New folder. There we go. And we're going to call it Chapter 7. Close out of this. Yes, we'll delete those folders. All right. So I'm going to start Visual Studio and create a new project. Windows Form application, and the application name is going to be Scuba Expeditions. And we'll go and change to my flash drive. Visual Basic, Chapter 7, select folder. Looks good here, so we'll hit OK. So I'm planning two parts for this video as well as the previous chapter. There is going to be quite a bit of code in this chapter because we're introducing functions and exception handling. The GUI stuff is going to be pretty straightforward, except for the splash screen that we haven't introduced yet. But I may have to break the coding part of it up into two videos, depending on how long it is. But we'll see. This one, I'm just going to do the GUI and maybe a little bit of coding just so we can demonstrate what the splash screen looks like. So we just put a couple lines of code in there for the form load event. But for the most part, this video is just going to be GUI design, just to kind of break it up. Okay, so we're going to rename the form object. And we're just going to call it form scuba. And scuba. All right. And we'll change the form name on this to change the form name just to Scuba Expeditions. Why do I keep wanting to type SCUMA? All right, so we have that. So the next thing we're going to do is add our splash screen in. And as you remember from my presentation video, your splash screen is just a screen that pops up when you start the application while the application's loaded to just give you a little bit of information about the app, maybe the version number. If you need to send a special message to the users about some maintenance or anything like that, you can put it there. Usually it has an image on it. So we're just going to create a quick splash screen for this. So the way we do that is we go to Project, and add new item. And then we scroll down and we look for splash screen. There it is, splash screen. Um, and I don't like calling things splash screen one, so I'm going to call it splash scuba. Okay, and then we'll hit add, and then we'll notice here um, that we have a new object here. It's actually a new form, and it's called Splash Scuba. And we could have actually called that a form because but it's not really a real form um, in the sense that of the forms we've been using. So I just like to prefix it with splash rather than form, so you know that there's a difference there. So a little bit of a different naming convention than we usually use. All right, so this is just a generic splash screen template that they give you. You can see it's got the application title there, version number, and copyright. So now we want to go and make sure the properties are set to this. So we're going to right click on the application name here. We're going to go to properties. This is going to give us a properties window that you probably haven't seen before. Um, so on the application tab, we want to scroll down here. And oops, what did I just change? Don't want to change that. You'll notice that there's a selection for splash screen here, and we want to change that to splash scuba or whatever you name um, your splash screen. Okay, so we've done that. And then we want to click on the assembly information button. So, and this is where you would set any text that you want to put into your splash screen. So you can put a description, a company, and it sets most of this stuff based on information we already put in the application. So it named it Scuba Expeditions. It has a version number in here. If you were modifying this application for a second time, you might want to change the version number. It puts in copyright 2021. So all of this stuff is pretty much good for us. We just want to check to make sure. But we can put more information in here if we want to. So that all looks good. So we're good. So let's close out of this. Just close that down. And now we're going to change our background image. So we click on our application here, and we're going to go down to background image. And we're going to go out to our folder where we have our resources. So I'm going to go to my Scuba Expeditions. Oops. No, I went to the wrong place. I want to go to my desktop, Visual Studio. Here we go, Visual Studio 2017 resources. Click on my scuba image, hit open, hit OK. And now we have our scuba diver image uh, in our splash screen. So that's pretty much it for our scuba application. We'll say yes, we'll close that. I'm just going to do a save all now, just so I have my changes made. I'm getting a little error here. Just want to check on that. reason, it still thinks my form is called Form 1. So I'm just going to rename this to Form Scuba. That should fix the issue for me. Okay, so we're good here. So the first thing we want to do with our main, so now we're going back to our main scuba form here. So the book directions tell me to change the size of the object, the size of the form to 870 by 490. So I'll just go to the size of my form, and we're going to make it 870 by 490. So it was pretty close to what it should be. So you may not even have to change it. Not a big deal. So we've got our title on there. Now we're going to add another background image to our form. So we're going to click on our form here. And we are going to look for our background image property. I already have the scuba in here, so I think I can just select it here. Okay. And it wants us to change the background image layout to stretch. Okay, so this makes our scuba diver image take up pretty much half of the user interface, which I don't really like from a GUI design perspective. I think, you know, an image should not take up half of the layout, but this is what the textbook's telling us to do, so that's fine. The next thing we're going to do is something a little different than what we've been doing in the past. I want us to put all our objects in a panel object. So that will allow us, since all our form objects are going to be on the right side of this form, that'll allow us to center our objects around the panel. Okay. So we're going to add a panel object. Remember, a panel is kind of like a group box, except um, it doesn't have scroll bars and everything. So we'll just kind of make it take up this area next to the image. Okay, so we've got our panel in there. And we want to change the panel object's back color to, first, I'm going to give the panel a name because it doesn't have a naming convention. We'll just call it PNL. PNL. Okay. Things like panels aren't as important to put naming conventions in because we'll probably never be referring to them in code, but I like to name everything anyway, just out of habit. So the next thing we want to do is change the back color to transparent on our panel. I think they said, yeah, so that's under web. So you just click on the color web and transparent, then everything will show through in the background. All right, so that's that. So now we add our label and our combo box. So remember, we're going to be displaying certain items in our list box based on a selection in a combo box. It's going to kind of be some cool little functionality there. So we're going to first add a label object to our form. And we're going to change this to, what are we going to call this? We're going to call it label title. Okay. And our text value of our label is going to be Oceanic Scuba Expeditions. Okay. And we want to change the font property to Stencil 22. So let's scroll down to font. It's kind of a funky font there. I don't think I've ever used the stencil font. There it is. So stencil 22. That's kind of a nice font. That's a little too big. But it says 22, so why don't we just make our form a little bigger? Yeah, I guess we can't do that. We don't want to make our form a little bigger. Let's make this a little smaller. Instead of 22, we'll make it 12, just to make it fit. Yeah, we can go bigger than 12. Why don't we go 16? Yeah, 16 seems to work okay. We'll put that there. And now we are putting a combo box in there for location. And I think, have we used combo boxes? I think this might be the first chapter that we're using a combo box. So a combo box um, is just like a list box, except you can drop down on it. So give me a size for my combo box. No, but it wants the font to be 14 points. So I guess we can do that. Make it a little bigger. That's a big combo box. We're not putting a label in this on this combo box because we're going to put some text in there so the user knows what they're selecting. So there won't be a label on here. So our combo box is going to be called, for a naming convention for combo boxes, CBO. So I'm going to go change the name properties to CBO combo box. Oops. And we're going to change the text property to select location. So we're going to use this instead of a label. Saying select location is going to fit in there. So we'll just make this a little bigger. Yeah, that's good. And the next thing we want to do is put some values, our locations in our combo box. In a typical real world application, you would grab labels from a, excuse me, from a database. But this application isn't connected to a database, so we're just going to hard code the values. You'd want to put them in a database so you could easily change those values in the database without having to recompile the application, like we would have to do if we were changing it here. So to add some values in, what we're going to do is click on this items collection, click on this ellipsis button, and we'll get a dialog button or a dialog box to enter some values. I'm sorry, I have a tickle in my throat. So we're going to be entering three values in here. Australia and Belize and Fiji. So these are our three locations that will appear in our combo box. We can't see them yet because the application isn't running, but that's okay. So now we are going to add a text box and a label for the user to enter the number of people that will be taking this scuba diving expedition. So this is going to be the number in the dive team. So I'm going to put a label on there, and I'm going to put a text box. And this is going to be label team. Sorry if I'm taking a few minutes. I'm trying to read from the book what this says. I'll be, whoops. LBL team and the text property is number in dive team. Okay. It wants me to change the font size to 16, but I have a feeling that's going to be a little too big. But we'll change it to make it bigger anyway. It's only 7.8, so we can make it maybe 14. Yeah, that's fine. All right. And our text box is going to be just txt team. That. And our text box, what's our font in our text box? Let's make the font the same as this one. I think I made this one 14. And well, it says 13.8. So we'll make this one 14 too. So they're similar. So you're going to change the font of your text box to 14. And we can line this up and just make it a little smaller because I believe we're only going to be putting 2 characters in here. So we can actually put a character limit on this. I think that is called max length. Let's change our max length to 2 characters for that one. All right. So what is next? Next is another label for select scuba dive. This is going to be the label for our list box. So let's put another label on here. And we're going to call this one label select. And let's make the font on this one 14 as well, since we're going with 14. And then our text property is going to say select scuba dive. All right, that looks good. Just gonna flip the page and look at that. Okay, it's pretty much centered. We can clean up the GUI later. As you guys know by now, I'm not a huge GUI person, but get it done. Next thing is we're going to be adding our list boxes for our appropriate scuba dives. Giving us a location. We're going to make our font size on this one 14 as well. First, let's change the name of it. And this is just going to be list dive, LST dive. Now we can go down and change our font. Make it 14. Beautiful. And now we're just adding our buttons. I think we're going to run out of a little room here. So I'm just going to move everything up because we have to add some buttons and some labels in here. And it's getting a little tight. So we'll just move this up a little. And we can resize this later if we need to. All right, so we get our list box, we get it named. Now we have to add our buttons for, what do we have for buttons here? Dive cost in clear form, and then we have a label below that. So let's put button on there. And this is going to be called BTN dive cost. And the text property is going to be what? Just dive cost. All right. And what does it want us to do to the, so it wants us to resize this to make it fit. And change the back color property to midnight blue. Oh, we're getting fancy. I guess that makes sense because the font here is blue. So change the background color of the button. If you didn't know, you can change the background color of buttons. I don't usually do it, but so midnight blue. There it is, midnight blue. It's almost a black. And then as you see, when we've changed that, we can't really read the font anymore. So we need to change the fore color, which is really the font color, to white. Just so now we have the buttons that you can actually read. And we're going to put, what I'm going to do here, just to make it easier for me. If you don't know you can do this, you can copy a button. And then you can right click and paste the button. So now I don't have to go and rechange those properties anymore. The font color and the background color, because I've already done it once. It just takes those properties along. So now all I have to do is change this to in clear and text property. Where's my text property? Disappeared because I clicked off the button. And I'm just going to change this to clear. I've got our two buttons, and I'm just going to make these a little closer together. And the last thing we do is we're going to put a label in here for the total cost. And the GUI has us putting in a label that has three rows in it. It's kind of weird, but we'll go along with that. Okay, so drop a label object in the toolbox. The label is called Label Scuba Dive. Oh, oops. Scuba Dive. And it wants the font size 16, but I'm going to make it 14. Okay, 16 is too big. And it wants us to enter a placeholder of 12 X's in the text property. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, interesting. And, all right, so it wants us to, so that's labeled scuba dive. Then we have, oh, I see, it wants us to add actually 3 labels in here. So what we're going to do, rather than doing that again, is I'm just going to copy this one and paste it and move it down. And then I'm going to paste again and move it down. So I think what I'm going to do is just make our form a little bit bigger. Make my panel a little bit bigger so we have the room here for this. And you can change the GUI as you see fit on your application. Yeah, that looks a little better. Okay, so that one is labeled scuba dive. The second one is labeled cost. And the third one is label length. All right, so we got our 3 labels. I think that is pretty much it. So it wants us to change the visible property to false for the following objects. Label team, text team. Okay, so let's do this. Label team, text team. So I'm holding down the shift key now while I'm selecting these objects. List dive, assuming this one too. And our 2 buttons, basically everything here we're making invisible. So we're going to go down to our visible property. and set it to false. So I could have gone and selected those individually, um, but it's a lot easier to select them all. I also could have just clicked and dragged. So basically, in this application, you are not going to see any of these things until you make a selection. So the GUI will be blank until you do that. And just let me click on a couple of these and make sure the visible property did get set to false, which looks like it did. So that is good. Um, that's good. And the other thing it wants us to do is set the accept and cancel button options. So remember, that's a form property. So we're going to set our cancel button to button clear and our accept button property. Scroll up for that to button dive class. So this way, if we just hit enter, it'll run the code. So this went pretty quickly. I just want to do one more thing. I'm going to double click on the form. And I'm going to just put one line of code in here before we move on to the full coding. I'm going to stop this video after this and do the brunt of the code. But I just want to show you, I want to run the application and show you how the screen, splash screen appears. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put a 5-second pause in the form mode of the application. So it displays a splash screen for just 5 seconds. Okay. So I'm going to put a comment in. Actually, let me go up first and add my generic comments that we have in here. So we have program name, and this is Scuba Expedition app. And we have developer. I'll put my chain, and then we have our date. Today is 3/18/2021, and then we have our purpose of our application. Purpose and this app determines the location of scuba dive and calculates total cost based on. So we've got our header comments, and we're just going to put in our comments for our form load. So this is the first piece of code that runs when your application starts. So I'm just going to pause 5 seconds for splash. Right, and this is kind of some weird code to put in here. So we're saying threading. It's like things on programs run in a thread. So threading dot thread dot sleep. Basically, you're telling it to pause, and the times are in milliseconds. So if we want to do pause for 5 seconds, we have to type in 5,000. All right, so that's all we have to do for that. I am going to save this again, and let's run our application to make sure everything works. And we should see the splash screen for 5 seconds, then the application starts. So there's our splash screen. 3, 4, 5, and there's our application. So we don't have any code in here. So we're going to put some code in here when we select our location. You can see the 3 values we put in here, and we select one of these. We're going to enable all those other objects we made visible, and then do a bunch of code on our calculations. So this looks pretty good so far. I'm going to stop this video right here, and the next video will be your coding. Okay, see you in a while.